The Zenthrians had seen it all. They had conquered civilizations from the distant reaches of the galaxy and crushed those who dared stand against them. Their empire was vast, spanning countless star systems, where the trillions of lives they controlled bowed to their will. No resistance had ever been enough to stop them from claiming what they wanted. It was an inevitability that every world they encountered would fall under their rule, and Earth was no different. It was just another minor planet in a remote corner of the universe that had never stood out on the galactic stage, and yet the Zenthrians were drawn to it. Their advanced sensors had detected strange patterns emanating from the planet, subtle signals of human life, as they called it, and to the aliens it was a curiosity, just another primitive race struggling to survive in the unforgiving cosmos. The Zenthrian fleet arrived without fanfare, their ships massive and gleaming like harbingers of doom, each one an awe-inspiring monument to their technological prowess. The leader of the Zenthrian fleet, Commander Vash, stood aboard his flagship and gazed out at the vast expanse of stars stretching before him. His fingers drummed impatiently against the console as he waited for the signal to commence the invasion. Earth would fall like every other planet had before them. He was certain of it. The Zenthrians had prepared for months, gathering intelligence from the shadows, watching the planet's defenses closely. They knew that the humans had no chance. Their weapons were laughable in comparison to the Zenthrian arsenal. The human ships were primitive, their technology outdated, and their military infrastructure almost non-existent. Commander Vash smiled to himself. He could already hear the pleas for mercy from the pathetic leaders of Earth as they surrendered without a fight. He had no intention of sparing them, of course, but the idea of watching them squirm was too satisfying to ignore. His thoughts were interrupted by the voice of his second-in-command, Lieutenant Cora. She spoke with a tone of reverence, her voice crackling through the communication channels. "It is time, Commander Vash," she said. "Earth's defenses are ready to fall. The fleet is in position and awaiting your command." Commander Vash's grin widened with cold satisfaction. He turned to the rest of the bridge crew and gave a simple nod. With that, the signal was sent. The Zenthrian ships began their descent into Earth's atmosphere, their weapons primed and ready for destruction. They were unstoppable. Nothing could withstand the might of their guns as the first wave of assault ships launched from the Zenthrian flagship and moved toward Earth's atmosphere. Commander Vash's mind wandered to the reports he had received. The humans, they weren't as advanced as they had assumed. They were nothing but an insignificant speck in the grand design of the universe, so it was said. Yet as the fleet descended deeper into the void of space towards the planet, his mind couldn't help but twinge with curiosity. He had heard rumors of humans who had managed to survive against greater odds, stories of battles that defied logic or reason, but those were just myths and legends, nothing that could possibly concern the Zenthrians. Their conquest was inevitable. No matter what humans had accomplished in the past, this time would be no different. Earth would bow before them, and the Zenthrians would add another world to their ever-growing empire. There was no other outcome. The fleet was unstoppable. As the Zenthrian fleet neared Earth, a strange unease began to settle over Commander Vash. He couldn't place it, but something felt off. The hum of the flagship's engines sounded too loud in the stillness of space. His crew moved with an unusual sense of urgency, as if they too sensed the unseen tension in the air. The vast expanse of stars ahead seemed unnaturally quiet. There were no signals from Earth, no transmissions, no warnings. As expected, the human defenses should have been active by now. Yet there was nothing. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Commander Vash stood motionless before the panoramic view of the stars, his mind racing. Was it possible that the humans had already surrendered? Did they give up without even a fight? He thought of their pathetic cities, their weak military structures, and dismissed the thought. No, the humans were merely waiting for their inevitable defeat to unfold. It was part of their weakness, and it made them ripe for conquest. But still something didn't sit right. The Zenthrians advanced closer and closer to Earth's orbit, and still no response came from the planet. No communication, no signs of resistance, only the emptiness of space, and the sense that something was about to unfold before them. As they entered the final phase of their approach, the tension on the bridge was palpable. The fleet had begun to position itself into formation around the planet in preparation for a swift and decisive assault. Commander Vash glanced to Lieutenant Cora, whose face remained stoic, but her eyes betrayed the same unease. He was feeling what was happening here. Why was there no sign of life? No human attempt to challenge them. Surely the humans couldn't be that passive. Surely they knew their fate. The commander opened his mouth to give the order to begin the assault. But before he could utter a word, the first ship appeared. It emerged from the shadows of the asteroid belt, flanked by several smaller vessels that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. The Zenthrian sensors failed to pick up any warning. As the strange ships moved into their path, the human ships were sleek and silent, unlike anything the Zenthrians had expected. They had no energy signatures, no detectable weapon systems, no obvious power sources, and yet they glided effortlessly through space with a predatory grace. The Zenthrians watched in stunned silence as the human ships closed in their formation, sharp and precise. The sheer audacity of this attack was incomprehensible to them. Earth's technology was far below theirs. How could these insignificant beings mount such an attack without a single transmission, without a single word of warning? The first strike came out of nowhere. A laser blast cut through the lead Zenthrian ship. With pinpoint accuracy, it pierced the ship's hull and caused it to explode in a flash of brilliant light. The Zenthrians scrambled to react, but they were caught completely off guard. They attempted to lock onto the humans with their tracking systems, but the human ships were already gone. They vanished as quickly as they had appeared, slipping back into the blackness of space without a trace. Before another strike came from an entirely different angle. The Zenthrians couldn't even comprehend how the humans had moved with such precision, how they had known where to strike. They had no time to regroup, no time to plan their retaliation. The human ships were everywhere and nowhere, all at once, each strike hitting with brutal efficiency and vanishing before they could be countered. It was as if the humans were ghosts or hunters preying on the weak. The Zenthrians' senses screamed in alarm, but the humans had already proven that they were not what they had assumed they would be, and the silence of space now felt more like a warning than an invitation. The Zenthrians were in chaos. Their once perfect attack plan had been shattered by an invisible force that they could not understand. As their fleet scrambled to respond, they could only watch in horror as human ships appeared and disappeared seemingly at will. The Zenthrians had never encountered anything like this in all their conquests. The humans fought without warning, without mercy. Each strike was precise and devastating. Their warships moved like predators, stalking their prey. Each attack came from unexpected angles and then vanished into the blackness before the Zenthrians could fire back. Their tracking systems failed to lock onto the human ships, as if the humans knew exactly how to avoid detection. The Zenthrians had relied on their superior technology, their ability to outgun and outmaneuver any enemy they faced. But here they were being outsmarted and outmaneuvered at every turn. What was even more baffling was the silence that surrounded the conflict. There was no communication from the humans, no demand for surrender, no speeches, no threats. The humans were not even acknowledging the Zenthrians. They simply fought with cold efficiency and relentless precision. It was as if the Zenthrians were irrelevant. In the face of this invisible assault, Commander Vash's frustration grew with each passing moment. The humans were not supposed to be capable of this kind of strategy. They were supposed to be weak and easily crushed, yet they were proving to be anything. But he had seen the reports. They were a species at the brink of extinction. Their weapons were outdated, their defenses laughable, and their ships clumsy and slow. At least that's what the Zenthrians had believed. But reality was different. They were facing an enemy who had somehow managed to turn the tables on them completely. He gave the order to initiate countermeasures, but the humans anticipated that too. The Zenthrian fleet began firing blindly into the void, hoping to hit something. But it was futile. The human ships were too fast, too elusive, and their tactics too unpredictable. Each Zenthrian ship that fell seemed to disappear without a trace. No debris, no wreckage, no indication of the ship's destruction. It was as though the humans had already perfected the art of erasing their presence, even in death. It was as if the Zenthrians were fighting against shadows. The human warships emerged again and again from the darkness, and with each strike the Zenthrians were driven further back, their once mighty fleet now in disarray, their pride shattered by the humans' unexpected brilliance. A Zenthrian destroyer was the next to fall, its hull pierced by a single burst from one of the human ships. The Zenthrians scrambled to send reinforcements, But the humans didn't give them the time they needed. The human ships were already repositioning and preparing for the next strike. They were relentless, they were everywhere. And yet nowhere all at once Commander Vash's mind raced as he struggled to understand the tactics behind the humans' attack. How were they able to predict their every move? How were they able to disable their ships so efficiently? The Zenthrians had never faced an enemy like this before. Their entire understanding of warfare was being upended by an enemy that was somehow far more advanced than they had ever imagined. The Zenthrians were used to fighting races that would cower or beg for mercy. The humans did neither. They fought with the ferocity of creatures who had nothing left to lose, and their warships seemed to reflect that determination. Each strike felt like the death knell of a civilization that refused to accept its fate. The Zenthrians now realized that they had made a grave mistake in underestimating the humans. They had come to Earth expecting an easy conquest, but what they faced instead was a battle they could not win. The Zenthrians were now desperate. Their fleet was in tatters, and every attempt to regain control was met with failure. Commander Vash paced relentlessly on the bridge, his mind racing for solutions, but every option seemed futile. The humans had disrupted every plan they had made, and their attacks were growing bolder. The Zenthrian ships were now scattered, their once formidable formation broken, as their commanders tried to salvage what remained of their pride and their forces. Vash turned to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Cora, who had been staring at her terminal in silence, her face pale with disbelief. She looked up at the commander and spoke in a voice tinged with fear. "They're everywhere, Commander," she said. "It's like they know exactly what we're going to do before we even do it. Their tactics are beyond anything we've ever encountered. We can't even track them, let alone fight back." Vash clenched his fists. The words were like a slap in the face. How could this be happening? How could they be losing to these insignificant creatures? His eyes narrowed as he thought of the humans. Their ships were supposed to be slow and vulnerable. How were they able to move with such speed? How were they able to predict every move the Zenthrians made? He felt the weight of the growing realization crashing down on him. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying the price as the human ships reappeared for another round of attacks. The Zenthrians were forced to fall back. They launched every weapon at their disposal, hoping for a miracle, but the humans were already gone before they could fire. The human warships moved like ghosts. They struck from different angles, every time with pinpoint accuracy, before vanishing into the void once again. Each hit seemed to disable a crucial part of the Zenthrian fleet. The aliens were helpless to stop it. The Zenthrian sensors could no longer detect the human ships. Not even their stealth technology could match the precision of these unknown attackers. The Zenthrians tried desperately to regroup, but the humans were relentless. They didn't give them a moment to breathe. Each strike felt like an execution with no mercy. The Zenthrians had no time to plan, no time to react. They were being hunted, but by whom? The humans shouldn't have been capable of such precision. Yet here they were cutting down the Zenthrian fleet piece by piece. Commander Vash's mind turned furiously as he tried to analyze the humans. Every move, they had to have a weakness. There had to be something about their ships or their technology that they could exploit, but nothing was showing up. All of their systems were scrambled. Their ships had been completely disabled without warning. And even worse, the humans were not giving them any room to maneuver or fight back. Every attempt to counterattack failed. The Zenthrians tried locking onto their targets using advanced tracking systems, only to find the human ships already gone. Every laser barrage fired into the empty void only seemed to put them further into disarray. Their battle strategies, their superior firepower, had all been useless against the human warships whose movements defied every expectation. Vash stood there on the bridge, watching helplessly as his fleet fell apart before his eyes. The realization settled in slowly and painfully. They were losing to a species that should not have been capable of standing up to them. The Zenthrians had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, but instead they had encountered an enemy that had turned their own tactics against them. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price for it. Vash's eyes burned with a mixture of anger and disbelief. How had they been so wrong about the humans? How had they miscalculated everything? They had prepared for this battle as if it were another simple conquest, but they had failed to understand the one thing that made humanity dangerous: their unpredictability, their refusal to accept defeat. The Zenthrians had thought they would crush them without effort, but they had learned too late that the humans would never give up without a fight. As the Zenthrians staggered back in retreat, the full scope of their failure began to sink in. Their fleet was falling apart before their eyes. Each new strike from the human ships felt like a hammer blow, and yet no matter how hard they tried to respond, the humans seemed to be one step ahead at all times. The Zenthrians fired their weapons, hoping to turn the tide, but every shot missed its mark. Their advanced targeting systems couldn't lock on to the elusive human ships, as if the humans knew exactly where to be and when to move. It was no longer a battle. It was a slaughter. Commander Vash watched in disbelief as another Zenthrian destroyer was obliterated in a flash of light. He gripped the edge of his console in frustration. How could this be happening? How could they be losing to this primitive species? His mind raced for answers, but the truth was undeniable. The humans were far more advanced than they had ever anticipated. They were not the weaklings the Zenthrians had assumed them to be. They had underestimated the humans in ways that were impossible to ignore. It wasn't just their weapons that were superior, it was their strategy, their tactics, their ability to predict the Zenthrians' every move. The humans fought with an intelligence and precision that left the Zenthrians scrambling to keep up. It was as if the humans had studied them, their every tactic, their every weakness, and were using that knowledge against them in the most ruthless way imaginable. The Zenthrians had relied on overwhelming force and brute strength to win every battle they had fought, but the humans were showing them that there was another way to fight, a way that was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And the worst part was that the Zenthrians couldn't even begin to understand how the humans were doing it, how they were able to anticipate their every move and counterattack with such deadly precision. Their sensors should have detected the human ships before they even entered their range, but instead they seemed to appear out of nowhere, striking fast and vanishing before the Zenthrians could react. Their systems scrambled to track them, but the humans were always a step ahead. Commander Vash cursed under his breath and slammed his fist against the console. He was a seasoned strategist and a master tactician, but this battle was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The Zenthrians had fought and won countless wars across the galaxy, but this was different. This was a fight that defied logic and reason, and they were losing badly. The humans had not only taken them by surprise, they had turned their own tactics against them. The Zenthrians tried to regroup, but it was already too late. The human ships moved in once more, with surgical precision, striking at their weakest points and disabling their weapons one by one. Each strike was calculated and deliberate, and every time the Zenthrians tried to retaliate, they found themselves outmaneuvered and outclassed. The sense of confusion was growing on the Zenthrian bridge as the once mighty fleet was being systematically dismantled. Commander Vash could no longer keep up the facade of confidence he had held at the beginning of the invasion. The humans had exposed their greatest weakness in a way he could never have anticipated, and the Zenthrians were paying the price for it. They had underestimated humanity in the worst possible way, and it was clear that their arrogance would be their downfall. The alien leader turned to his remaining officers and gave the order to retreat. But even as the command left his lips, he knew it was too late. The humans would not let them leave alive. The Zenthrians had no choice but to run as their fleet splintered into chaos behind them. The humans continued to press their attack with relentless efficiency. Commander Vash's mind raced as his fleet retreated deeper into the blackness of space. The humans were relentless. Their warships pursued them without pause, each move perfectly calculated and timed. The Zenthrians had never encountered such a force. They had never been hunted in this way. No enemy had ever dared to pursue them once they were on the defensive. But the humans were different. They didn't give chase with blind fury. Instead, they moved with cold precision. Each step of their pursuit seemed inevitable. Their tactics had proven more than just a surprise. They were a demonstration of something far beyond what the Zenthrians could comprehend. In the distance, the Zenthrian ships continued to fall. The humans seemed to be picking them off one by one, disabling their engines and weapon systems, leaving them stranded in space like helpless prey. It wasn't even a fight anymore. It was slaughter. Commander Vash stood at the bridge of his flagship, his face a mask of frustration and disbelief. His pride had been shattered, and with it his confidence in his own abilities. For the first time in his long military career, he felt the cold grip of fear creeping into his heart. He glanced at Lieutenant Cora, who had gone silent since the retreat began. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of dread and confusion. They had never faced an enemy like this. Before she spoke quietly, "Commander, we are losing. We have no way to stop them. Their ships are too fast, their strikes too precise. We can't even track them long enough to return fire." Vash clenched his jaw. It was the truth, but he refused to acknowledge it. He had been taught that defeat was never an option, that victory could always be seized, even in the direst of circumstances. But this time he couldn't see a way out. The humans had taken everything from them. They had turned their technology and tactics against them. With ease, Commander Vash had been certain that he would be the one to bring Earth under Zenthrian control. He had dreamed of adding it to their empire, of crushing this insignificant species into submission. But now the tables had turned, and he was left with nothing but the remnants of a broken fleet. As he stared out at the battlefield, his thoughts turned bitter. He had made a grave mistake. Underestimating the humans had been a fatal error, and now they were paying the price for it. The humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting to preserve something much deeper, something that went beyond mere survival. They were fighting for their existence, their home. And it was something the Zenthrians had never understood. Their entire way of conquering worlds had always been based on the principle of overwhelming power, with little regard for the inhabitants of those worlds they conquered and destroyed without hesitation. But the humans, they fought with something more primal. They fought with a will to endure, a will that no alien species had ever truly encountered. The Zenthrians had thought they could break them. They had thought they could crush the humans into submission, but they had failed miserably. As the human warships moved in for another strike, Commander Vash knew he had no choice left. He ordered the fleet to regroup for one final stand. But even as he gave the command, he felt a deep sense of futility. There was no hope left for them. They had underestimated humanity in a way they could never have predicted, and now they were reaping the consequences. The Zenthrians' arrogance had blinded them to the true nature of their enemies, and now they would pay the ultimate price. The humans had shown them a strength they had never thought possible, and in that moment Commander Vash realized just how wrong they had been to ever think of Earth as a simple target. The final stand was not a battle, but a desperate attempt at survival. The Zenthrian fleet had been broken and scattered across the void of space. Their remaining ships were in disarray, their once pristine formations now a chaotic mess of drifting wreckage and ships on the brink of collapse. Commander Vash stood before his officers on the bridge, staring at the panoramic view of space that once offered the vast possibilities of conquest. Now it seemed to mock him as the human ships circled above them, like vultures picking at the remains of a fallen empire. Lieutenant Cora approached quietly, her expression grim. "The human ships are closing in, Commander," she said. "We have no more time. We can't escape. And we have no means to fight back." Vash's eyes were darkened with frustration. As he turned away from the view, he had been forced to confront the truth. The humans were relentless. They had pushed them into a corner where there was no room to maneuver, no chance of victory. The Zenthrians had underestimated the humans at every turn, and now they were paying the price. The humans hadn't just fought to defend Earth. They fought to eradicate their invaders. They fought with everything they had, their ships relentless, and their attacks precise. The Zenthrians had been used to fighting enemies who crumbled when faced with overwhelming force, who cowered at the first sign of destruction. But the humans had never flinched. Their resolve only grew stronger with each attack. The silence of space seemed to hang heavier now with each passing moment. The humans grew closer and closer, their ships appearing out of nowhere, attacking without warning and vanishing before the Zenthrians could even respond. The fleet was being reduced to mere remnants, as every strike from the humans took down another Zenthrian vessel, another piece of their once mighty force. Commander Vash clenched his fists in frustration. "We cannot surrender," he growled through gritted teeth, his voice full of defiance. "We will not be defeated by these creatures." His officers exchanged uneasy glances, but they all knew the reality of the situation. They had no choice but to fight to the bitter end, even though that end seemed inevitable. Their warships were not equipped for this kind of battle. They had relied too heavily on brute force and overwhelming technology. But against the human speed and precision, They were powerless. The Zenthrians watched in disbelief as another ship exploded into a fiery wreckage. The humans struck swiftly, and without mercy their ships moved with a kind of coordination and synchronization that the Zenthrians could never hope to match. It was as if they were one mind controlling the entire fleet. The Zenthrians had become nothing more than prey in a hunt that had gone on far too long. The gap between their technology and the humans' tactics had never been clearer. As another Zenthrian destroyer was obliterated in a flash of light, Commander Vash felt a sinking feeling in his chest as the realization hit him. They had no chance. The humans were too smart, too fast, too efficient to be stopped with force alone. They had underestimated the will of the species who had something to fight for, something worth dying for. The humans had never been as weak as they had believed. They had underestimated the human spirit. The Zenthrians had come to conquer, but they were leaving with nothing but defeat and shattered pride. The humans had given them no quarter, no room for mercy. Every move had been met with resistance, every attempt at retaliation thwarted, and now the time had come to face the consequences of their arrogance. Vash turned to Cora, his face pale and his voice tight. "There's nothing left to do, Cora," he said. "We are finished. The humans have shown us that we were never as powerful as we thought, and now our fate is sealed." The enemy was no longer an unknown. The Zenthrians had seen what they were capable of, and it had cost them everything. The final moments had arrived. The Zenthrian fleet was broken, scattered across the stars, with no hope of escape, no hope of survival. As the human ships continued to press their attack, they were like ghosts appearing from nowhere and striking with deadly precision. Each Zenthrian ship that fell only served to add to the feeling of inevitability. The humans had shown no mercy, no compassion. Their warships moved with such speed and accuracy that it was almost as if they had anticipated every move the Zenthrians made. As the last few Zenthrian ships were slowly eliminated, Commander Vash stood at the center of his bridge, staring at the viewscreen. As his fleet was torn apart, the hum of the ship's alarms were the only sound filling the room. But the commander didn't hear them. His thoughts were elsewhere. They had underestimated the humans from the very beginning. They had assumed that Earth would be an easy conquest, a world ripe for the taking. But they had been wrong. They had failed to understand the resilience of humanity, the will to survive that burned so deeply within them, that even in the face of certain defeat they had fought back with everything they had. The Zenthrians had thought their superior technology would guarantee victory. They had believed their weapons would be unstoppable and their fleets invincible, but they had never counted on the humans' ability to outthink and outmaneuver them at every turn. It was this unpredictable brilliance that had shattered the Zenthrian fleet, and now Commander Vash knew that there was no escape, no retreat that could save them. The Zenthrians had come to Earth, believing that they could crush these insignificant creatures and claim the planet as their own. But instead, they had awakened a force that could not be subdued, a force that fought for more than just survival. It fought for its home, for its people, for its future. The humans had proven to be the most dangerous adversaries the Zenthrians had ever faced. Their tactics had been flawless, their resolve unwavering, and their unity unshakable. Commander Vash knew that the battle was lost. The humans had won. The Zenthrians had come to Earth with one goal, and one goal only: to conquer. But they had failed miserably. Their arrogance, their belief in their own invincibility, had blinded them to the true strength of humanity. They had believed that Earth's people were weak, but now they saw the truth. They were a species unlike any the Zenthrians had ever encountered, with hearts filled with defiance and minds that refused to yield. The Zenthrians were being crushed under the weight of their own mistakes. The last Zenthrian destroyer was disabled and floating helplessly in space. It was clear that their invasion had failed. The human warships gathered around the remaining Zenthrian vessels, like predators circling their prey. And yet the humans did not destroy the remaining ships immediately. They watched from the shadows, silently observing. As the Zenthrians finally came to terms with their failure, Vash stood motionless as he felt the cold weight of defeat settle over him. The sounds of battle had faded, the chaos of the past few hours, now replaced by an eerie silence. The humans had won, but they had not killed them all, not yet. The remaining Zenthrian ships were left in a limbo, unsure whether they would be obliterated or spared. Commander Vash could only wonder how the humans would finish this fight. Would they annihilate the remnants of the fleet? Or would they show mercy for the first time? The fate of the Zenthrians rested in the hands of the humans, and the commander understood that their decision would mark the true end of the Zenthrian ambition to conquer Earth. The humans had won. They had proven that no matter how powerful an invader might be, there was always something more powerful. The spirit of humanity had not only repelled the invaders, but had shown them that some species were simply not meant to be conquered.